welcome to Mayor LaToya Cantrell's Office of Youth and Families Roundtable. And today we'll be discussing the citywide fiscal map, and we'll be moving into the Child Wellbeing Index. So joining us this morning, of course, we have Mayor LaToya Cantrell. We also have with us this morning the Director of the Office of Youth and Families, Emily Wolf. We have the Deputy Director, Camille Alexander, and we also have the Program Manager, Villa Maria Lupin. So thank you all for being here. We will go into our opening remarks at this time.
Okay, thank you all so much. Exciting time for us. Well, one of the first things I did as mayor coming into office was create the Mayor's Office of Youth and Families, and with a real focusing on a holistic, our entire family unit. So not just our children, absolutely, but the core, meaning the parents and the grandparents, those who touch the lives of our young people as they matriculate through development. And Emily Wolf is our director of that. Also, as you know, Camille Alexander is the deputy director, and Ana Maria Villa Maria Lupin. We've just been heavily focused on, one, how can we ensure that we have resources and leveraging resources to, again, focus on families. In 2019, through a partnership with the Kellogg Foundation, it was very important, again, for us to look at ways for us to leverage public dollars, but also privately to, again, focus on meeting our families where they are. We were awarded $1.5 million over a 3-year period for the Office of Youth and Families. And in doing so, what was central to some of the deliverables built in that was completing an asset map, an investment map of what we do and put into our children ages 0 to 24. There were other things tied to that. You'll hear more from the team. They've been working diligently on it. But New Orleans is now the 3rd city in the country to have completed an investment map, a financial investment map. And we know from doing this analysis that this city, and we looked just at our budget for 2020, because we've heavily invested again in families. 3rd in the city to do this, and we know that we're spending $40 million collectively and comprehensively through our departments, and we'll break through, you'll actually see all of that. But $40 million that this city is in direct spend. Now, of course, we even have partnerships that we have created outside of government, but today this is focusing on what government is doing to impact our families, again, by meeting them where they are. So these are real numbers, these are real programs, and they're real outcomes. And so with that, I'm going to have the team walk you through our investment map. And it's pretty impressive. And when you really drill down to the programmatic side of where we're touching those families and those children, you can't make it up. And so, you know, we're as transparent as we can be. And so without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over. Emily, you're gonna walk us through.
Yeah.
And we'll just plug and play as we move through this conversation.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank and acknowledge first the Children's Funding Project, which is the consultant that we worked with on this project. Additionally, the Kellogg Foundation, as the mayor mentioned, and then the other departments that we worked with across city government to provide all the fiscal data that's contained in this map. Why do we set out to do this? First, this administration believes that our investments in our budget are a direct reflection of our priorities. And so it's our intention to do this annually and really make it available to the public so that they can interact with the data. This is now housed on the city's website, so if constituents go to nola.gov/youth and click on the 2020 fiscal map, you can interact directly with this tool. So our key audiences here, one, are our city decision makers, of course. So everybody from our city council members to the administration, anybody who's in a seat that has a decision-making power. We want them to be armed with information. The second set of audiences is really the public. So really by having this tool, it provides transparency, and it also provides a common language for us to talk about our investments. A lot of folks see the city budget and get overwhelmed, and it can be difficult to look at it and splice it and see it through different lenses, and that's what this tool is providing. It gives us a common language to talk about the investments we're making in youth from 0 to 24. And then finally, the third audience is philanthropy. You know, the city can do a lot, and we're doing a lot with a little bit. And, you know, times are difficult, and we've had philanthropy step up in major ways through the COVID-19 crisis. But there are absolutely ways that we need philanthropy in order to help us bolster and fill the gaps that the city cannot reach ourselves. So finally, this tool is really about matching our investments to outcomes. And so, and as the mayor talked about, through this youth master planning process that our office has been engaging with over the last few years in partnership with the Children and Youth Planning Board and the New Orleans Youth Alliance, we are going to be able to drill down into our most critical needs and understand where our young people are in terms of their health, their economic security, and their education. And then we'll be able to match what we're learning about where our young people are with these investments and look at how our investments are a reflection of our priorities and how they're addressing our most critical needs and the young people who are most vulnerable in our city.
And the time couldn't be perfect, you know, even, you know, as there's call for whether it's, you know, that defunding police conversation, even, you know, reinvesting or investing more in our young people and our families and the health and equity in our communities. This is work that we started way before the conversation happened, but it's so much for us to be proud of as we walk you through this tool.
Great. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Camille, who's going to actually walk you through a few tabs of the tool so that you can get a feel for how you, for all of our constituents, can interact with it and our city decision makers.
Okay, good morning. So it's really important to understand that this tool truly is interactive. And so, as Emily and the mayor mentioned, it's part of a suite of tools that we have created as part of our youth master planning process. So this specifically looks at the different sources, so the funds, where is the money coming from? It looks at what it's being invested in, so is it an intervention, is it a program, is it an operating cost? And then it also looks at the specific population. So is it young children, is it older children, is it more comprehensive and intended to support the household? So this first tab, once you are able to get on the website and look at it yourselves, you'll see the first thing that you interface with is a summary. So here at the top, if you see where my mouse is, that big 40, that $40 million is the total investment that is specific to children and youth. And so the fiscal map really takes into account monies that come from the city or programs that are administered through the city. So it's important before we start for me to tell you what's not included. So what's not included are federal programs that are federally administered. So for example, that's TANF, that's SNAP, and also K-12 education dollars. We really wanted to focus this tool on the city and use it as a way to self-reflect, to see what dollars that we actually have authority of in terms of allocations and how we are using those. The first thing that stands out, if you look at the top right corner, the box that's labeled investments by outcome, what you'll really notice is that we truly have a pretty balanced investment. And so these are color coded, so safety and justice, health and well-being, education, quality of life, youth voice. And you really see that we, for the most part, every suite has some funds that are allocated to them, and they're pretty much proportional to what we're, focusing on as an administration. If you look on the bottom left side, these name the different funds. So I'm gonna highlight here the city's investment, which again, we're focused on the city's budget. So that's why that comprises like a larger portion. And if you look, now it demonstrates of the city's funds, how much is allocated. So that's represented by the darker part of the region. And when you hover, you'll see that it also says highlighted. So that tells you of the 11.2 million that are allocated toward enrichment activities, the city directly invests 8.7 million. And so you're able then to really see how are city dollars being used, and hopefully you're able to see that we are filling gaps where maybe some of the federal funds are not necessarily as readily available. If you look on the bottom left side, it goes by line item. So if you scroll here, you can see these specific entities or organization or departments that receive the funds, what they're used for, and the total. And so as Emily mentioned, this is interactive and will be updated annually and really give the city and the public an opportunity to see who's getting money, how's it being spent, and then we can tie the outcomes to those investments. Another thing I want to click and show before we move on is, if you notice, the largest part of our investment, so when we talk about level of intervention, we're talking about what type of services. Is it preventative? So before somebody's identified as needing something, is it intervention? So, we've identified a specific population who needs maybe some rehabilitative services, or is it basic services? So thinking about, Maslow's hierarchy, that bottom layer, like health, safety, security. So if you see, the largest part of our investment is actually in positive youth development. And this is actually where New Orleans really shines. As I continue through the tool, you'll be able to see some comparisons and some other information. And we really do invest in making sure that kids are supported outside of the school time. So the mayor always references the city holds you when you're not in the classroom. So this really demonstrates that that is truly where our investments are concentrated. And so as you're navigating through the tool, you can always click in and click out, and it'll bring you back to the comprehensive view, and it also allows you to drill down. And again, everything updates. So if you look on that bottom left side, now that we've clicked basic services, programs like WIC, Women, Infants, and Children's Program, that is highlighted as well. And it shows you what specific resources are allocated there. The next tab is related to outcomes. So this, when you first land on it, you're able to see all of the different categories that I mentioned before. So if you look, this reflects that same table where enrichment is our biggest investment of $11 million. So once you click it, it just allows you to drill down further, and it also allows you to see how we're defining these different categories. So on the bottom left, the definitions are here. It's scrollable. You can use these, and our hope is really that community leaders, service providers, and philanthropy will really start using that same common language. So as we're talking and we're compelling different, whether it's a ballot initiative or we're having conversations, we're all very clear about what health and well-being comprises, or what safety and justice comprises. And so if you look here at enrichment, you can again drill down. It's an easier way for you to focus. And then you can again see the descriptions of the different programs. So here you're seeing Nord Center programs, their aquatics, athletics, all the way down to also what the foundation provides. And again, if you click out, it'll bring you back to the overall overview. Back to this label is the level of intervention. So same thing, it's all interactive. So the idea here is that you're able to filter. And so whether you're a community organization, you could highlight whether you're writing for your own funding. You can demonstrate, what currently exists, what gap hopefully that you're trying to fill. Or if you're just someone who's looking at the city's investments, you can see how we prioritize that. And again, once you click into it, so this tab is intervention. You see the big total is 10.1 million. And if you scroll on the bottom side, it tells you the specific resources. Are they personnel? Are they programming? Are they operating costs? And so one thing to point out is when we talk about levels of intervention, we really want to be able to isolate how our dollars are used and where are we getting the most bang for our buck. All right, and so then the next tab is specifically around age range. We wanted to include this so that we could be able to see who, when we talk about children and youth, is really being invested in. So we use a very broad definition of youth, and that comprises also young adults that are up to 24. And we do that because we know that opportunity youth, so kids who are disconnected from school and from work, they are a priority. And in a lot of ways, nationally or other cities have not invested in them or looked at them. We've really tried to make sure that we see you across your lifespan and that you're really supported before you really enter the workforce or being an adult and starting your own family. And so if you look here, I'll start with all children and youth. Keeping in mind that we define that as ages 0 to 24. If you hover over the tool and you forget, the definitions are there as well. So if you notice, all children and youth 0 to 24, all the way down to like young adult, which we've identified as 18 to 24. And so here, where you see we've isolated all children and youth, you really see the bulk of the investments in that are truly around enrichment. And then if you look over to the left-hand side, again, it tells you the funding stream, the amount that has been allocated to them, and then a description. So for example, you can see what Wisner is, how much dollars have been allocated to it, and then that gives you a starting point to be able to determine how we're using funds to invest in our youth. Another example is if I click early childhood. So again, you can hover. Now you see early childhood, for our definition, is prenatal to up to 3 years old. This represents the City Seats program that the city directly invests in, and that the mayor has doubled in each of the years of her administration. So if you remember, it started off at $750,000, then it was 1.5 million, now we're at 3 million, and that's all reflected here. So that's the education, and it also shows you where the funding stream is coming from. We also have items like maternal child health, Healthy Start, which the city administers, which is a home visiting program, and also our WIC program are also reflected here. And again, that outcome category is labeled. So you're able to see, okay, what age group, what specific type of outcomes, and then also the level of intervention. And again, with the tool, you unclick and you're able to see the comprehensive view. Lastly, this slide is really compelling because it really dives deeper into the services and the programs. So first, I want to orient you to the right side of the screen and point out that the out of school time activities are by and large where we're really investing. Again, mentioning and referencing the mayor's investment in kids beyond the classroom. And so here, when you click it, you're then able to see again what the funding streams are, the program descriptions, and then the actual allocations that have been appropriated to it.
And read them some of those.
Okay. So, for example, one around teen programming and outreach. These funds are used for the juveniles that are both housed at the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center, formerly known as the Youth Study Center. But also these are resources that we advocate in terms of supporting them once they leave. So we offer a suite of services and different types of interventions. If you scroll down, our office is included because some of our operating budget is allocated to different programs and different initiatives. So those include different like youth voice initiatives that we do. So like the Junior Civic Leadership Academy, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, and then you also have things like NORD. And so then there, once I clicked NORD, now you're seeing what's their portion of that total. So it truly is comprehensive and allows you to see. Another thing I want to point out that makes New Orleans unique is because we are the parish, or if we're talking the national people, the county, and a city, we do have responsibility for our pre-adjudication detention facilities. So where kids go before they actually receive a sentence. And so that's what that incarceration tab is representing. And that, it's important to point out, comprises the personnel that are used, because we know your most critical investment is the personnel, the people that are touching your kids and providing the services. But it also includes the different services and resources that are allocated to them. And the city directly invests in the youth, their education, their supportive services, so whether that's mental health, whether that's different like recreation, yoga, art, and then again, also even just the medical. So making sure they have social workers, making sure that they have nursing staff around the clock. And so you're really able to see here where dollars are concentrated, but it also allows us to look and say, okay, where can we beef up? Where are there some gaps? Where are there areas that, if we're looking comprehensively at a longitudinal strategy, how can we allocate more dollars to a maternal child health initiative? How can we allocate more dollars to maybe case management? And so the goal for this tool is for us to be able to drill down and use it almost as a report card. You know, how well are we doing, and then where are there opportunities for us to improve? So I'll click one more so you're able to see. So for example, early learning, again, it has been updated. And if you click here, you're able to see that's the City Seats funding. So a lot of our early learning is directly touching kids, and it's not living in personnel, it's actually living in the services. All right, so now I'm gonna pass this on to Emily, who'll, walk you through some different comparisons and some other, summaries.
Right, now this is exciting. It's all exciting. It's all exciting. No, but when you look at the comparisons and you see what we're doing in our city and versus what's happening in other cities that are larger, their budgets are larger, but Emily.
Yeah, great. So this slide, on the left-hand side is a budget primer. So again, as I said earlier, lots of folks, the budget book is hundreds of pages long. It can be overwhelming. This breaks it down and really provides an explanation of what the city's general fund is versus the total revenue. So the top pie chart, well, first I just want to point out that our per capita investment in children and youth for ages 0 to 24 is $361. This is an important figure because it allows us to compare our investment in youth versus other services. So many people have talked about the investments that we make in things like incarceration, to the tune of thousands of dollars that cities or municipalities spend around incarceration. And there's, as the mayor said, within the current context, there's a push nationally to be really thinking about investing in prevention. And people are demanding more intentional support for investments in social services that make things like police intervention and incarceration less necessary. And so what this provides us is that per capita investment in children and youth. The top graph is what it shows you is $22 million is the city's portion that we're investing in children and youth out of the total general fund revenue. So the reason that that's different from the $40 million is that these are all flexible dollars. So there are certain things that are in the bottom graph that are inflexible. We'll go into that a little bit more. But the top graph excludes items that don't flow through the general fund, things like dedicated millages, for example, like a dedicated millage for the library, et cetera. That wouldn't be contained in that $22 million. So that's 3% of our overall general fund revenue. And then the bottom graph is our larger total revenue of the city. And so what's important to note is that that green area of the bottom chart is not all flexible dollars. Many of these funds are things like FEMA, our debt service, bonds, special funds that are not flexible. So it's not that the city necessarily has all of that green area, the 96, the 1.1 billion to play with, right? But what we do want to highlight is that this gives us a snapshot of our investments in children and youth as compared to the overall picture. You can click to the next slide. And then this slide 7 is really about how we benchmark against some other cities. I want to note that this is really an anecdotal snapshot. It's not comprehensive. It's just we picked a few select cities to compare in order to illustrate our investment. And as the mayor mentioned, since we're third in the country to release something like this, it can be difficult to compare apples to apples. But it should be noted that, so for example, you can see here for Denver, their investment per capita per youth is $924 per youth. That's compared to New Orleans, $361. One thing that makes Denver different that folks might not know is that their city passed several years ago a dedicated pre-K for all kids throughout the city, and that's contained in the $924 per youth. Additionally, Baltimore, when we compare our investment to Baltimore similarly passed a dedicated carve-out of their city budget for specifically youth services. So there are cities across the country that are standing up and are saying, if we want to protect our young people and invest in them, then we need to put our money where our mouth is. The city's done that in its, as Camille mentioned, in our initial investment in early childhood and all of the other investments that we're talking about today. But there's absolutely, in terms of how we benchmark against other cities, there's a lot to celebrate, and there's also obviously always room for growth.
And not all are the ages from 0 to 24 that we're investing in. and which is demonstrated here. Some are 15 to 21. It's just not 0 to 24.
The other thing before we go to the last slide that I just wanted to note is that what this doesn't show you, as the mayor mentioned at the beginning, this is just 2020 budget. So what this doesn't show you is that longitudinal data. You're not looking at this budget as compared to prior years, for example. What we hope to do is, as we revisit this year after year, is to be able to look at over time how we are changing or adjusting our investments, growing the pie, right, to be able to say that we're investing even more than $40 million in children and youth, and look at how that tracks over time. But just in terms of a back of the envelope comparison, what we do know is that the Cantrell administration, as compared to several years ago, funding, for example, for the New Orleans Recreation Department has gone up 13%. Additionally, we passed the Parks Millage, which is bringing New Orleans Recreation Department their revenue up by $1.5 million when that goes into effect. In addition, the Health Department hadn't seen an increase in years in terms of their general fund revenue, and just last year was the first time that the city passed an additional $500,000 to go to the Health Department. So that's not what you're seeing here, but I think that those are important items to note. You also are seeing things here that has made this administration different. If you go in and look and drill down at the data, although this administration has concentrated a lot of its efforts on the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center and really refining what we're doing there and making sure that kids are well taken care of and rehabilitated through that service. We're also making investments in services outside of the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center, like our evening reporting center, and like an intensive supervision program that account for $500,000 of additional investment. So again, some of the things that you're seeing here, to be able to show you over the long term, we think it's important to see it from that perspective as well.
Exactly, and even when you've heard me recently speak about the need for this city to not spend millions in a phase 3 development for the jail, for example. And not only because of the financial constraints that we're under now, but what's the greatest need for this city? And what's the best outcome that we can get for the dollars? And so when we've done our math and we know what we spend per child, but also we've done the math to know what we spend on inmates. And $77,000 per one is what we spend. So clearly, it's an opportunity to reinvest more, and that's how we look at when you're talking about defunding. It's more of allocating resources more appropriately and effectively to get the outcomes that we're looking for. So asking, and as I bring it to the community and show them, listen, we can absolutely provide mental health services needed for our inmates, absolutely. But we can do it within the capacity that we currently have, not have to spend millions more when there's an even greater need. So that's a part of what we wanted to convey this morning as well. Ms. Hannah Maria.
Great. So what I'd like to point out is the response during COVID and the effects of the pandemic, particularly on vulnerable children and families. And the city has been able to raise funds via the Pour Together New Orleans Foundation, which is a 501c3 that works in coordination with the mayor's office to funnel disaster response funds in investments to most who need it. This, of course, does not encompass all of the donations and funds that have come through to support COVID relief and recovery. But for now, it just highlights the funds that have been leveraged specifically for children and families through that mayor's fund. So some of the things that we're talking about here, I should look at this instead. And the Mom and Baby Initiative, a need that bubbled up because of COVID, had to do with the support of what it sounds like moms and babies, And the Office of Youth and Families partnered with United Healthcare and Cam Jordan to be able to provide diapers and feminine hygiene products, and we distributed a tremendous amount of thousands of pounds of diapers and feminine hygiene products and baby food products in collaboration with various organizations that already have their hands on those populations. Similarly, another need that really bubbled up and came through our office was the need of people who have zero access to federal funds at all, ever, and that was highlighted during this time. So, in partnership with, again, funds funneling through the Mayor's Fund for Together New Orleans, we were able to receive assistance to provide a stipend to families that don't have access to federal funds. Also, other needs that bubbled up were how to protect families, give them tools that are usually expensive to make sure that they're healthy, and so we had a very big donation of thermometers that are smart and talk to your phone. And we have thousands of thermometers have also gone into the hands of families and children through various partnerships and programs.
Child care centers as well.
Child care centers, every community-based organization that we have worked with have received thermometers to distribute.
And I just want to add, I think that this response and the creation of Forward Together New Orleans and the coordination with the mayor's office has really been because of Mayor Cantrell's leadership and her experience as a grassroots organizer in Broadmoor after Hurricane Katrina. You know, we really saw the major impact that philanthropy could have in getting funds to support our most critical needs quickly. And so that's really what this is a reflection of. So with that, I'll just say in terms of the next steps, we're going to be releasing this. I mean, it's on the What City's website now. Again, NOLA.gov/youth, and you just click on the Fiscal Map tab, and the public can interact with this tool. We will also be releasing this in concert with Child Wellbeing Index, which will show geographically all the different zip codes across the city and how children are faring in each different zip code as it relates to their well-being, health, education outcomes, and economic security. We really see this data as a jumping off point. It's a part of our youth master planning process, which it has a number of community conversations. We just convened a community conversation amongst young people that was organized by young people last Saturday that was held virtually. So again, this data is for all of us to use, and we really hope that people will take advantage of it and let us know if there are things that they see that that maybe we've left out, or that they would, or if they have ideas about unique uses of it.
And so these are like real dollars, and what we will fold in are how these dollars are leveraged against other opportunities. So one example is our partnership with Tulane School of Social Work, even where Ms. Anna Maria and even Ms. Camille, licensed clinical social workers for our city. They've created the city of New Orleans as being a site for our graduate students who are at Tulane, but they have to do 1 year of clinical. So in that partnership, we've been able to leverage their expertise of being supervisors to these graduate students who have to have their clinical supervision, and they have to supervise for 1 year at a location. So that's an example of leveraging the dollar, meaning them, but it's not an actual dollar, but it is an impact, and we get something from it. And so we're just trying to be as creative and innovative as possible to leverage the real dollar, but also have an even greater impact than what that $1 means. And so we really learned it from community organizing. We built it really in Broadmoor to respond to the needs of the community and focusing on behavioral health as well. but there are many different opportunities that we're taking advantage of through the Office of Youth and Families in ways that we have not as a city overall. And so it's very exciting because we are really meeting people where they are and going deeper. When Emily mentioned our ability to layer the data over our census tracts where our people live, that is so valuable because now we're in the process of moving through Census 2020. And we're able to see where we're getting the responses in our communities, but also able to educate our residents on not only what their needs are in their community and the health index where they live, but taking that and showing them and say, look, this is why we need more than 20% of the folks who live in the census tract completing the census, because this is it will have a direct impact on the federal dollars that we get. Whether those dollars show up here or not, they will show up in the communities that need them most. So the timing is perfect as it relates to not only this tool, but the tool is built on a foundation of assets and resources and investments that we are making. You can't make it up. But with here, we wanted to give you the real dollar. So it's not fluff. It's the real dollar. And all those other asset points, we can build them in, but to start, we really wanted folks to understand. And it's the perfect timing, again, with the national conversation, and also with the city moving into budget season. So we want it to be interactive, of course, for the public, so that when they're talking about these things, that they're educating themselves and they know exactly where the monies are going, and also aligning it with what they want to see us do better. Because there's always room for improvement. We know that, we're committed to it, but you have to start somewhere. But this administration has started with investing more and very aggressively into youth and families. And so with that, we can take questions, Ms. LaTanya, and move us through.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do we have any questions in the room?
Well, that's good. Well, that's a good thing. But again, I cannot overstate the time and the opportunity for the public. I will be building this tool in to how I engage the public through my budget process. And of course, the New Orleans City Council, once the administration submits the draft budget to the council, then they will, of course, go through their process of public engagement around the budget and preparing it for their adoption by December 1st, which is by law. So again, perfect opportunity with this tool, also in terms of how we will be engaging on investments here, but we're going to ask the public to also dive into the New Orleans Public Police Department's budget so they can see where the money is going. And they can also see things that are dedicated funding sources that have to go, mandated by the federal government if we talk about some portions of the consent decree. But it will also give them a sense of where we may have opportunities for shifting, or you know what, where we need to keep those dollars to ensure that we have the tools and resources needed for effective and constitutional policing practices in our community. So just thank you for your time. We're excited about this.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for your work. You're just doing good.